the Aces Optimus Show with your host, Dr. Craig Morris.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Craig Morris here. Welcome to Aces Optimus, dedicated to optimizing human potential in the clinic of life. We're here to try to understand more about what is it that makes people excellent. Why do they strive for excellence? Why do they strive to improve themselves, to improve their lot in life, to improve the lot of others? Today, we are joined by one of my great friends and one of my mentors. You know, as years go by, you appreciate your mentors more, but you also seem to have a shrinking number of mentors over the years. And so as I started to imagine where we might go with Aces Optimus, one of the individuals who was so critical to me in my professional life and my professional growth and my personal growth was Mr. David Chapman-Smith, today's guest. David, welcome.
Thank you, Craig. Nice to be here.
David has been a leader in the chiropractic profession for decades. He was a combination of brilliance and kindness and openness and diplomacy at a time when the chiropractic profession, really, I think in the 80s, was very divisive and helped to bring us together and unite us into what became the World Federation of Chiropractic. And that process has been very well documented. And in fact, David addressed it in his book, The Chiropractic Profession. But I think what I really would like to try to get into today are the things that led you to your role in the chiropractic profession, and even before that, the key people, the key aspects in your life that impacted your nature, your interests, that drove you in your parenting and in your mentoring and in your ability to bring a very, very divided profession together. So I'd like to start off by understanding maybe a little bit about your childhood and the factors that you felt helped to shape the personality that became David Chapman-Smith.
Well, as becomes apparent from the accent, I'm from New Zealand originally, and I grew up there in the 50s and 60s in a very secure household. Both parents, 4 brothers, so there were 5 boys in the family, all of close age. And the values that were instilled in us by our parents were crucial, and it has been for me. And on one hand, that was, things like self-discipline, actually doing what you said you were going to do. Nothing remarkable, just being solid and reliable. And on the other hand, a fairly free degree of risk-taking in life. Be adventurous. It'll pay you back. The more you put into it, and if you take reasonable risks, you're going to go much further than if you don't do that. So those were 2 very important elements in my background. And coming from the experience and the characters of my parents. That's a few years ago now, and I actually did, Craig, about 5 years ago, write a bit of an autobiography for my family and friends. And when I went back to look at the country I grew up in, socially it was very, very different back in those times. If you want me to carry on, in my university years, I really wasn't intellectually inquiring the way many people are, and perhaps you should be at university. I was working hard on law school exams and then playing senior rugby football, which is, I'm in Canada now where ice hockey is the goal. In New Zealand, it's rugby football. And those were busy years. I then practiced law for 2 or 3 years, and then influenced pretty much by, as I've said, by my parents' example and with their encouragement. I didn't accept a law partnership or settle down, but I left to go to England. I thought for about a couple of years to just explore the world a bit more. I ended up staying away for 5 years, marrying an Italian American from Boston, and getting a full-time, finally, teaching job, teaching English literature at Malvern College in England. And in fact, if I'd had family wealth behind me, I might have stayed there because I loved the job, loved the work, for reasons too detailed to get into here. But then I went back to New Zealand and got into a law partnership. And a few years later, along came the New Zealand Commission of Inquiry into Chiropractic. And I was the junior lawyer representing the chiropractic profession there. My lead lawyer, who also was very influential in my life, being a man named Richard Craddock. And that commission, we thought, would last about 3 or 4 months because of the degree of medical attack and the process the commission adopted. It actually took about 18 months with a lot of patient testimony and was quite a dramatic event. Nonetheless, as a lawyer, when it was over, and I went back to my normal practice, which had been continuing on the side anyway. And it was only through a series of other events that I was invited to North America for 6 weeks to talk about the New Zealand Commission and its report. That led to me coming to Canada in 1982 just for 2 years, telling my law partners in New Zealand I would be back, but I failed to do so. And I stayed and discovered in chiropractic, a profession that had great merit, but was still pretty undeveloped, and could see that over the course of my career, this was going to be a very worthy client and great fun to work with and for. And so that's what I did. And as you know, after representing the profession for the Canadians, I then for about 30 years published the Chiropractic Report every couple of months as a sort of research and professional summary, and then was asked to help form the World Federation of Chiropractic. That was 1988 that was formed, and I was its Secretary General through to 2015. But you mentioned in your far too generous introduction various characteristics, including diplomacy. And I think that if I looked at what I brought to the profession, more than anything else, it was diplomacy. And I'd learned that in the New Zealand Commission, where we had to persuade a very medical commission that chiropractic was great. And you don't do that by walking into a room and saying chiropractic's great. It's more complex than that. Do you want me to expand on that a little?
I would. Appreciate it.
We're talking about diplomacy and trying to be convincing on behalf of the chiropractic profession. What I found as a weakness, sort of a positive weakness in the chiropractic profession, is that chiropractors love their profession so much that they are evidently biased and over the top when they try to present it to other people. Now, I'm a lawyer, and as a background as a lawyer, there are 4 different sets of facts. There are the facts as you are presenting them for your client and what your client tells you. And in this case, that could be the chiropractic profession saying, David, this is the message we want to give. Then there's the other side's set of facts. And in this scenario, that would be the medical profession opposing Then there are the facts as the judge finds them, which are different again. And in this scenario, that would be the government or the insurance company or whatever. And then finally, there are the real facts, which are different from all the others. And if you are representing the chiropractic profession and you walk through the door hugely keen about chiropractic, you'll be discounted immediately in the same way that the surgeon coming in saying everyone needs surgery is going to be discounted. And so diplomacy is at the heart of effective representation of the profession. And I suppose for the wider purposes of this podcast, it really is so much so in most things in life, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. I think we must take responsibility that whatever roles we have in life, we end up being ambassadors for those roles. Mm-hmm. So it can be at the head of an entire profession, as you were diplomatically, professionally, or it could be you as the chiropractor or the physical therapist or whatever your profession may be. But in the end, you are a representative of it. And in so doing, there's a responsibility that you take and utilize to raise it, or you can lower it depending on how you approach it. And there's dynamism within that. That's part of the art, and that was part of your great strength that I learned early on when we met. I'm often asked, when I'm teaching my rehabilitation courses, about how long should you do this procedure or these exercises, and I always respond with the analogy, it's kind of like a hug. If it's too short, it's impersonal. And if it's too long, it's uncomfortable. So therein lies the art of interpersonal communication, and either building bridges or lowering bridges and making the communication and the human interaction either closer and more intimate and more positive and agreeable, or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, entirely. And of course, one of the reasons the chiropractic profession has flourished is there is, on average, so much more human contact and empathy between chiropractors and their patients than other health professionals and their patients. And that was something that I saw very early on, then experienced when I had chiropractic care myself. And as you know, I turned around at some stage and married a chiropractor, so I know a bit about this.
Yes, you have a lot of expertise on multiple levels with the chiropractic profession. And that you are talking about the wonderful, brilliant, magical Dr. Sarah Borges, who's going to be another guest on an upcoming podcast. So you also mentioned your background in sports, and I know about, we've been friends for a long time, so I know your background both with rugby and also a common passion of both of us, even with surfing. But I thought maybe you might have some ideas of how sports and also teamwork work, and maybe what impact that may have had, in addition to your family background, your positive family background, in shaping your personality and your way of meeting and connecting with people.
They're probably more significant than I realized. And I have two thoughts as you mentioned that. First of all, I did play through school and after school and as a young man, a lot of team sports and at a significant level. And so these were really fundamental experiences, and teamwork was at the very heart of it. And the understanding that whatever you could do alone, you do so much better, and the experience is so much better shared with a team with others. So that's one side of it. The other thing is I've always loved running. In fact, this morning, quite early at dawn, I was out doing 8 kilometers. on a beautiful sunny morning in Canada in late summer. And running has never been difficult for me in the sense that I've always loved it. I'm not all that good at it, but I've done New York and Boston and various marathons, and I've loved it over the time. But the training and the discipline and the commitment and seeing the gradual improvement over time and seeing what it does for all aspects of your life, that's been a real learning experience too. I think one of the real lessons in life is how constant application will get you to a wonderful spot in the end. But if you try and get there too quickly, or you're inconsistent and you don't have that self-discipline, you don't reach that spot. And now I'm preaching to you. I know, given what you've done in your life, interprofessionally and generally, you know this well. But that's something that you learn out of sport, that, for example, in rugby football, you've got, I suppose in any sort of football, you've got one natural foot, which for me was kicking with my right foot. And then the goal, if you're going to reach an elite level, is to be equally good with the other foot. And then if you practice in the right way and long enough, lo and behold, you get to the stage where your left foot is better than your right. In other words, that application over time and practice and sticking at it, you end up better than your natural state.
Well, I think it's perfectly stated. What I like to say is that there is a saying that practice makes perfect, but especially in my DNS courses, I always like to share, because in my work with Prague School of Rehabilitation, it was a model that was based on quality of function, as opposed to quality of function as opposed to quantity of function. And quantity was much easier for your assessments to see if you could lift 50 kilos versus 40, if you could do 20 repetitions versus 10, that was easy. But to really define and then to improve on the quality of your movement patterns and your efficiency of your dampening capacity of your walking, your moving, this was difficult. But as it became clear what it is and what it feels like and what it looks like, this is important. And so I was, so as time went past, I realized that practice itself doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And I found that this statement was one of Vince Lombardi, the great Green Bay Packers coach. And for those that are National Football League fans, it's his trophy in his name that's provided to the Super Bowl winner every year, the Vince Lombardi Trophy. And so quality counts and character counts. And what you showed me, you mentored me, when we met, I believe it was summer of 1993 perhaps, or 94, down in Mexico, Cancun, at a World Federation event. And at that time I was interested in opening up and starting the Slovak Chiropractic Association, because I really just wanted to join it, but there wasn't one. So my wife at that time, Jana, being Slovak, we said, well, let's try and do this and do something for the profession. And we went down there, and some of especially the European presidents of their associations, who were long-time barroom brawlers politically to get things accomplished and to survive in unfriendly environs, were not quite as welcoming. But I'll never forget you taking us aside and sitting down, and essentially you wanted to just give us a chance to get to know us and say, who are you and why would you consider this? And it was so nice. I'll never forget it, because it was so warm and allowed us to just be ourselves. And it would have been very easy to be intimidated. I had at that time a deep fear of public speaking. And it was something that I had no idea if I would ever overcome that. And I remember I was asked to just stand up and invite myself, and I had David Chapman-Smith, and I had the president of the World Federation, and this group of people who I'd read about and admired, and they wanted me to come stand up and speak about why I was there. And I was still actually trying to figure, and I was, at the moment, when I found out I was going to have to stand up, I was seriously doubting why I had come down to Mexico to start this. It seemed at that moment an extremely poor idea. But no, despite that, the only way we really grow is to get out of our comfort zone. And I could have been much more out of my comfort zone, but then I ended up going back. I took courses on public speaking and found out, you know what, I can do this. Mm-hmm. And it actually became very enjoyable. But I think this is part of why we've put together this Aces Optimus, is to understand what your barriers are, what your strengths are, and how do you continue to grow. I see that for example, as you continue to challenge yourself in your running, and I'll be 67 in a couple of days, and I think you're around a decade older than me, something like that. And so we see that it's not this idea of challenging yourself and competing. And when I say competing, in life we do compete at times with others, but our main competition, I think, is with ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so I see here as a runner who's continuing to challenge himself. And it's just, but to me, it's character. It helps to define character.
And Craig, just a little comment on competing. This is really a very interesting area, because given what chiropractors do, and given the huge prevalence of neuromusculoskeletal disorders worldwide, levels of disability from back pain, neck pain, all of these things, there's more than enough work for chiropractic, physiotherapy, anyone else in these adjunct professions working in that field. So to me, this whole idea of competition and concern about that is overreaction, really, for the profession. And this is actually, I think, an important thing personally too, is rather than focusing too much. Obviously, you've got to know about competition, but rather than focusing too much on that, just simply get on with the job, do what you do well, do what you said you were going to do. In other words, perform, be honest to yourself. And that's what counts, rather than trying to outmaneuver or worry about opposition or competition.
100% agree. In fact, people might not believe me, but you've actually just segued me into a next topic that I'd really like to discuss with you. Mm-hmm. And this is the competition in the healthcare profession, especially, for example, between physiotherapy and the chiropractic profession. And I'd like to use as an example the man I consider to be the most famous physiotherapist in history, who is Robin McKenzie. So Robin McKenzie was there at the forefront, being a New Zealander, also at the forefront of the New Zealand Commission trying to block chiropractors getting into the socialized healthcare system, with their admission into the system. First time I ever heard him speak was at the American Back Society when I was fairly new in practice in the 80s. And he was up on a panel, and there was a question that was posed to him: when is it appropriate to utilize a chiropractor? And he said very bluntly at that point, well, that's very easy. Never. And but as time went by, he changed. And when I say he changed to what was the most extreme position that I ever heard, to 180 degrees change in time, is something that I personally observed. He first met and I think, became enamored with Dr. Gary Jacob, who's a mutual friend of ours, a chiropractor who is brilliant and also one of the funnier people and wittier people I've ever met in my life.
For sure.
And and so with his charm, with his intellect, he was able to actually become the first chiropractor who was a certified McKenzie therapist. Mm-hmm. Means he went all the way to New Zealand, he trained with Robin, and he became one of Robin's key instructors, and I think also key people that he would talk with on issues. And with time, he also continued to be an instructor at American Back Society, which was a multidisciplinary society with chiropractors and physiotherapists and physicians and psychologists, and that we all worked together with the idea of having a teamwork and focusing on the patient. And with that, I got to know Robin, and then he ended up authoring two McKenzie chapters in my low back textbook that was published in 2006, my low back syndromes textbook. And so we got to know each other at our meetings and annual meetings. And then we became also a kind of pen pals with emails back and forth. And one time I was contacting him because, and I think you may know, I had thought about, after my book was finished, of getting a physiotherapy degree. And only so that I could be more of an ambassador between the two professions, because there still was so much animosity. And I had come through my studies with Professor Yanda and Levitt at the Prague School to work with and become friends with and learn together with brilliant physiotherapists. And for me, it was so disappointing, this division, and thought maybe I should get a degree to be able to help bridge it. And I was talked out of it by a very brilliant physiotherapist saying, with your training in chiropractic and your training with the Prague School already, you're not going to learn anything. And this was Sandy Burkhart, doctor.
So let me add just a little bit on Robin, who I got to know well too. So yes, back at the New Zealand Commission of Inquiry in the late 70s, he was saying he was dead opposed to chiropractic. That was an era, of course, in which the medical world didn't believe or know anything about biomechanical problems. And on one hand, you had Robin dealing with his way of correcting biomechanical problems through posture and some use of manual therapy, and you had chiropractors using their adjustment, their spinal manipulation. 30 years later, I was lecturing for Robin and his programs in the United States also, and he's now left us, of course, but in my library, I've proudly got a signed copy of his book. It's instructive to know that he was opposed by the medical and physiotherapy world just as much as chiropractic. When he got to the United States, he was preaching extension in a world that believed in flexion, and he was from little old New Zealand, and he was kicked around the place hugely until he found his sponsors in Southern California and the quality of his work was realized. But to move on from that to the broader thing we're talking about, competition, during all the time that I was representing and part of the chiropractic profession, I would look south of the border to the United States and see the battles, the legislative battles going on, whether it was Texas or California or wherever, where the chiropractors were raising money and lobbying so that PTs couldn't use spinal manipulation. I knew that in the end that would never win, but I wasn't in those local markets, and politics is politics. But in the end, that was bound for failure, and it was just naked turf protection, which many groups get into. But at the same time, I was watching the UK, England, and Europe. And in England, you had the physiotherapy profession and the chiropractic profession and the osteopathic which is more traditional there without medicine, all coming together and saying, we should be the logical partners working together. We
Yes,
don't want medical doctors trying to do spinal manipulation or any other sorts of manual therapy. They're not trained for it. They don't know what they're doing. It's logical on the evidence and on the skills and on the patient satisfaction that we should be working together. There's more than enough work for all of us. Instead of fighting each other,
exactly.
work together really in a cabal to make sure that medicine keeps doing what it does, rather than trying to say we want everything, including the manipulative healthcare.
Yes, perfect.
Mm.
One of the things, one of the last notes that Robin sent to me, he said, you're going to find those on both sides of the aisle in chiropractic and physiotherapy that are going to be against any kind of collaboration. And what I say is stuff them. He said, always remember this, that it's for the patient we exist.
Mm.
And I'll never forget that statement from Robin, and that I appreciated so much. And he also, I did chat with him one time a little bit about you, and he was so glowing in his commentary, in his thoughts. He just said, David is so brilliant. He is so wonderful. We didn't start out well, but we came to really get to know each other and really appreciate each other and form a very nice friendship, a very nice relationship.
Well,
And
it's very kind of you to say that, but enough about me like that. To finish with Robin,
yes,
in 1997, we had the World Federation, 1999, we had the World Federation Conference in Auckland, New Zealand, and we had back the members of the commission and many of the great players before that commission, including Robin. And I remember him accepting that invitation, taking the stand to an audience of chiropractors, talking about his history, but saying, may the best man win.
see how it evolved even then. Very nice. So what has happened now? I know you've been retired now from the profession for 10 years. Have you had any impact, or have you had any involvement, or have you, what have you seen with the World Federation and its and its evolution?
Well, I think wisely I withdrew completely. Having been the face of the organization for nearly 30 years, it was only fair and appropriate for my successor, Richard Brown, that I got right out of the way. And frankly, much as I've loved my career with chiropractic, I'd put on hold many other things. And I'm a man with 8 children and 18 grandchildren directly and through my second marriage. And so there's a lot happening. I've only watched the WFC from afar, reading its quarterly reports. I was recently at its latest Congress. These happen every 2 years, and this was in May in Copenhagen, Denmark. And the reason I went to that was that my successor, Richard Brown, was retiring, and a third Secretary General was coming in, a man called Brad Bearer from South Africa. And I wanted to meet him, congratulate Richard. And of course, it was wonderful. I caught up with many old friends and many former readers of my chiropractic report. And so I had a great time there. The Federation's gone from strength to strength. And I think there are various reasons for that. But one is that it has always had at its core the development and support of research, which in the healthcare world is basically advertising. I mean, it's more than that, but it's the equivalent of advertising in the rest of the marketplace. You want to get anywhere, if you're the medical profession or the chiropractic profession or anyone, you better be doing research and publishing interesting results. So the World Federation's biannual research conference is the biggest, with the most prizes awarded internationally in chiropractic,
Yes.
and that's been important. The other thing is that it has been a very good forum for settling down anyway, the differences in the profession. You know, that's an ongoing thing which you can never solve completely. You've got to manage it. But the very nice thing at the leadership on the Council of the World Federation, there is no faction in the profession, there is no nation, there is no association, there's no special interest that's got a grip on the council. There are only 3 Americans on it, and one of them is from the ICA, the other 2 are from the ACA. Then you've got just as many Canadians, there are Europeans, Australians, South Africa. What you've got is a balanced thing where the only things that go forward are things that are right-minded and decided by that council. So that's been very helpful. Right now, of course, World Federation's in that interesting transition phase where the 3rd and new Secretary General just started on July the 1st. And he actually did come to Canada for a couple of days to visit me, which I appreciated, showing a real interest in the history of the organization to help found his plans for where it's going forward. But to just finish with the World Federation, you talked about meeting me in the early 90s. Do you know, at that stage, 92, 93, there were no chiropractic colleges in the world outside North America, and then 1 each in Australia, England, and South Africa. There were 2 chiropractors in Brazil. You know, today there's 1,750 and there are 4 schools. There was no growth in Mexico at all. Now there are 3 schools, 2 of them state schools fully funded by the government. I could go around the world. What happened in the 90s is that the profession was going truly international. Truly international in the sense that even the American colleges had to sit back and see that some of the international ones were generating more quality research and more momentum than they were themselves. And that was a completely new thing. So to be in the World Federation then was fantastic. And I know that I've contributed quite a bit to the profession, but it's been completely a win-win situation. Can you imagine me, a young lawyer, a little bit tired of litigation with insurance companies and corporations, discovering the chiropractic profession? Underdog with a great case, maturing, growing. My opponents were going to be the pharmaceutical world and the medical profession. Can you think of anything better for an opportunity to ride that horse? And so during my career, I saw the profession maturing and growing, going from the point where it might have failed to now it cannot fail. It's just a question of how big it's going to be. So that it was wonderful to be part of that. And this podcast is partly about excellence. I think as I prepared for it, one of the messages I did want to leave is that although there clearly is a place for excellence in the sense of fine strategy, intelligent strategy, doing it right, far more important is simply setting reasonable goals and achieving them. You know, when you're young, you think there's a brilliant world out there, and how are you ever going to compete? When you get into it, you find that most people don't do what they say they're going to do, that there's a lot of incompetence, and that if you simply set yourself reasonable goals, have the self-discipline to do it, achieve your deadlines, do what you said you were going to do, the world's your oyster. And that can go for a whole profession. You know, if you say you're going to develop national clinical guidelines, evidence-based, do it right, which we did in the early 1990s in the US and Canada.
Yeah.
If you say it's important to get into the VA and start doing research there and meeting with medical colleagues and setting up residencies, set the goals, work for it, build the team, do it. And it's not a matter so much of brilliance as just consistency and doing the job.
Well, I've said for a long time, character is the capacity to follow through after the initial inspiration has passed, right?
Yeah.
Because it's easy to say it when you have this bright idea, but then after that passes and you say, oh my Lord, now what have I said? Now what have I done? Now I need to roll up my sleeves, pass through it, get it done.
I've never liked strategic planning, but it's something you sort of got to go through. And from the very first strategic plan I was involved in preparing, I had a little saying on the top, all planning, all bright ideas degenerate into hard work.
That was one that I will hold and I will attribute to you. I love quotes, and I'm inspired by great quotes, and that's a reality-based and experience-based quote right there. Very practical. But what do you think about? I'm inspired by our current our current WFC president, who I think we both know well, and Dr. Kendra De Silva. I met her. I think I'd met her at the World Federation meeting years ago, but then I had the opportunity to lecture in South Africa as a keynote speaker for their association, and then to go over, and she invited me to teach DNS courses there that she helped to organize. So we stayed with her. We spent great time with her, and she actually referred me patients that were very complex cases that I flew back to South Africa to take care of. But I felt she was such a strong character, such a strong personality, so wonderful and so humane and available to get to know. Mm-hmm. And I think that she's been a perfect person to be a leader in the profession. I thought I'd ask you a little bit about your experience with Kendra.
Yes, Kendra is having a wonderful career. She was twice president of the South African Association. About 5 to 10 years before I retired, when we were building capacity at the World Health Organization in Geneva, Switzerland, we got very near to Kendra and her family moving to Switzerland and her taking a position with WHO. That's how highly we thought of her. And that only fell through for really stupid budgetary, financial, administrative reasons within WHO. They just kept failing to make decisions within the right time frame as promised. And here was Kendra with a husband and with school-age children, and she couldn't just keep dangling. So that failed. But the mere fact that she was up for and ready to take that shows how highly we regarded her and how wide her skills are. There are just not that many chiropractors that would get into a policy position at WHO.
Well, I think it makes perfect sense. It seems to me as though I did remember hearing some of that history. I knew she was involved with the new ICD-10 diagnoses on an international level, I think as a representative for the profession. And so she's always taken a leader, but you see very often these types of leaders, they're natural in their nature and spontaneous in their personality and their warmth tend to be able to bring people together.
Now, Craig, we've talked a lot about myself. I don't know how much has been told of your career on previous podcasts. Have you ever spoken about some of your sports work, the way people were flown across the country for you, when everything else had failed. I don't want to mention the names of specific well-known golfers, but something there too. Tell us just a little bit about some of those exciting moments.
Well, my first entry into really what I would say, I because I was always athletic, I always enjoyed sports, and I always enjoyed competition and camaraderie of it. So when I started practice, I was looking to take on sports injuries immediately, and I'd had my fair share of injuries. So I could definitely look at it from the patient's perspective. But then that gradually increased with time. So my first really foray into international sports was with the International Powerlifting Federation. And it was, I had been involved with the International Federation of Sports Chiropractic, FIX. I gotten to know Dr. Tom Hyde very well, and so he asked me to join and be involved with powerlifters. I've been working with weightlifters and powerlifters in my practice.
That is one crazy sport.
Yes, but because of that, a lot of times you find certain sports where people that are excellent, your challenge is not to get them out to exercise like it is with your normal weekend warriors, so to speak, but instead it's to slow them down and to stop re-injuring themselves. And that was true there, to slow them down and then to work on technique. And that gave me the opportunity then to work at world championship events. And so that was great to see the training, to see the discipline, and to take on different types of injuries with that. So that was really where it started. And then after that, I got involved with the National Hockey League team, and I worked with the Tampa Bay Lightning for several years. And I think in many ways, with regard to the profession, the most important part of that was not that I was involved with an NHL team, was that I was not the team chiropractor. There was a team chiropractor in Tampa Bay, logically, and she was excellent chiropractor, and she was a sports diplomate in chiropractic, and she'd held that position for several years. But I'd already had my training with the Prague School of Rehabilitation, and using their techniques and also manual medicine techniques out of Central Europe. And so I was interested in posture and gait and the quality of movement. And so I had the opportunity to see a few patients in an emergency basis when they were out here. And I was referred to them through the great Dick Vincent, as you remember, the late great Dick Vincent.
Yeah.
Who was another mentor of mine, and also of Tom Hyde, and Greg Dorr, who's Dr. Greg Dorr, who's also already been on my podcast. So I ended up getting involved with them. I was able to resolve conditions that others hadn't seen. My very first interview for my podcast, that's already available for anybody to watch, it was Kevin Weeks, who you know, the great goalie, and now commentator for ESPN and National Hockey League Network. So he was with Tampa Bay, and they flew him out at a time, and he talks about how he felt as though his career was in danger because of his back injury, and he'd been treated in Toronto, and then where he was from Scarborough, in Toronto area. And then they'd already been through the orthopedists and the team chiropractor and the team physical therapist and trainer and massage therapist. So, and nothing had helped, and he was just starting his first season. And so they sent him out to me, and he responded very well. I would have 5 days to assess them, start to treat them, get them on the road, arrive at a diagnosis, and then send them back, fly them back. And it was a very good, efficient strategy, because these young kids, really in their 20s, but such great athletes and great capacity, had so many pressures back home. And so the fact that they could be flown away and be left to just focus on quietly getting better was very important. Yeah. And so that worked well. And that also, I think, helped me in my future teaching. Mm-hmm. And then I had the same opportunities then to work with the PGA. After a series of lectures in Australia, I was introduced to a team that were taking care of golfers that was composed of chiropractors and physical therapists and massage therapists, and we had 25 of the best golfers in the world. And for me, I was brought in because my lectures hit a nerve and felt like there was things I was talking about in functional restoration and other locomotor system and overall training and balance and performance, in addition to manipulative techniques and other soft tissue techniques. So it was the combination and understanding now at that point in 2013, what our research had shown how the brain changes with chronic pain and how it can be rechanged, how it remains adaptable if you use corrective exercises with manual techniques. And so that was my message, and that was able to then be taken to the European Golf Association, the European Tour, and also the pre-PGA Tour. And all of a sudden I was in the middle of a group where we had three of the guys who were holding the titles. One was holding the British title, British Open title, won the US Open title, and won the Masters. And they were all part of our 25 group, all at the same time. And so it was this caliber of athlete, of golfer, that all of a sudden I had an opportunity to work with and help. And I was really doing more one-on-one rehab with them. And then I was also teaching our group. So I was kind of the professor of our group. So all of these, just these opportunities came to me by being open, sharing information, by wanting to be the same kind of a teammate professionally that I was when I was a teammate, when I was playing Little League Baseball, for example. It was the same thing, that you were looking to be part of a bigger thing and to do your part and to be respectful and kind and leave and not build bridges, or not build barriers.
I've always felt that sports chiropractic provides a wonderful model for the profession generally. And in my last years with the World Federation was working closely with FIX to try and help them, because for all their small band of dedicated volunteers, they'd never really had staff or an office or the capacity to build and grow to where they should be. And sports chiropractic is so important because, let's see if I can remember the reasons. There were three key reasons I always used to give. Let's see if I can remember them. But one is that it's collaborative. In other words, it's about the patient, not you. And you better learn that, or you're going to get nowhere in sports chiropractic, where you've got the athlete and his or her coach in the middle of the wheel, and then spokes out to the chiropractor, the nutritionist, the orthopod, blah, blah, blah. So it's collaborative, which clearly is vital for the future. Secondly, it's you've got to have a toolbox. Much as people say, and I totally agree, that the core of the chiropractic profession is and must always remain the adjustment. The great majority of chiropractic offices should be delivering good adjusting.
Yes.
But in the sports chiropractic model, which the profession generally should drift more and more towards, you've got a bigger toolbox. You've got to know about soft tissue. You've got to know, have all these other things that can adapt. We know that at an elite level, where you're in a, say, team at the Olympics, you may be just adjusting. But for all your teamwork, all of the stuff that gets you there, you've got to be able to provide a much rounder service than that. So it's interdisciplinary. There's a wide toolbox. And let's see, can I remember that? Oh, yeah, the other one is that in the modern world, athletes are really your heroes, your stars. So the sort of people you're talking about, NHL players, NFL, they've all got their people now too. But the last few Olympics, we've had teams of chiropractors there. You've had athletes insisting that they come, and the organization that Kent Greenwald heads up about, good publicity for chiropractic. If you look at what they do, a huge percentage of it is prominent athletes. So, that's another reason for chiropractic to be more and more into that field too.
Absolutely. Well, David, we've come to the end of our time, and I simply can't thank you enough as my longtime friend, as my mentor, as somebody who I've always looked up to and continue to look up to. Thank you for taking the time to share with this information with me and our audience. And I just wish you all the very best. And I'll be in touch because we haven't spoken enough personally too long a period of time. So I'll be in touch with you in the near future to try to catch up.
Well, thank you so much, Craig. Been a pleasure. And to anyone who is watching this in due course, and as a member of the chiropractic profession, you don't need me to tell you, but I will. You did right. You chose the right one. What a great profession it is, and do your part to grow it. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, David.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Aces Optimus Show. Catch you on the next one.